December 1999. Manufacturing facility. Japan, the fluorescent lights of a Sony factory hummed overhead, reflecting off the long rows of assembly lines. Hundreds of PlayStation 2 consoles moved on conveyor belts, each one ordinary to anyone who glanced at it. A sleek black shell, Sony logo gleaming, controllers packaged alongside. But this batch was different. In a sealed, high-security corner of the factory, behind reinforced walls, a team of U.S. government scientists and contractors huddled over a single console. They were not employees of Sony, at least not officially. Their badges identified them as consultants, but their purpose here was classified beyond top secret. "Insert the module carefully," said Dr. Reynolds, a wiry man with wire-rimmed glasses, holding a tiny circuit board no bigger than a postage stamp. It contained a miniature mobile phone, pre-programmed with an untraceable SIM and encrypted firmware. The assistant nodded, sliding the board into the hollowed-out cavity behind the disk drive. Wires snaked into the PS2's internal circuitry, connected to the motherboard in a way that would make it completely invisible to any normal user. "This unit," Reynolds said quietly, "will be our fail-safe. If activated, well, you know the consequences." One of the engineers swallowed hard. "You mean the dead hand system?" Reynolds didn't answer. He simply pressed a button on a control panel, running diagnostics. The tiny phone blinked, alive but silent, its internal battery fully charged. The display on a test monitor showed midnight, but it was dormant, awaiting the trigger. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of machinery. Outside, the factory roared with normal production. No one could suspect that a single console rolling down this line would one day hold the fate of the world in its plastic shell. Reynolds leaned back, voice barely audible. "Remember, this is just one unit. Only one. The rest are normal. Nobody must know which one this is. Not Sony. Not anyone." The console was carefully boxed, labeled as a standard PS2 for export, and sent into the shipment queue. Somewhere in the world, a child would one day pick it up, play it, lose, and start a countdown that could end humanity. The car idled quietly in the shadow of the factory gates, rain streaking down the windshield. Dr. Reynolds drove, hands tight on the wheel, while Dr. Hayes, younger and visibly tense, fidgeted in the passenger seat. He finally spoke, voice low, almost a whisper. "Reynolds, why are we even doing this?" Hayes asked, staring out at the wet asphalt. "We're making a console, a video game, and if someone loses in, what did you call it? Ocean Wars 2. Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Yes, if they lose, it triggers the dead hand system. Every nuclear warhead on Earth, automatically." Hayes shook his head, incredulous. "A game? That's insane. The world could end because some kid screws up a level? How? How is that even defensible?" Reynolds glanced at him, his eyes cold. "It's not about defense, Hayes. It's a fail-safe, a last resort. Humanity doesn't always make rational choices. Sometimes it needs a test, a filter. Ocean Wars 2 is just the interface." Hayes swallowed hard, silence settling between them. "A game, a child's game, and we're putting death in its pixels. One console, one loss, and billions die." Reynolds didn't answer. He kept driving. The factory receded behind them, the world unaware that a single PS2 now contained a trigger capable of ending all life. Hayes leaned back, heart hammering. "I can't believe we agreed to this." Reynolds finally spoke, flat and final. "We didn't agree. We obeyed. And one day, someone will play it. Win. Or lose. That's not our decision anymore." The car disappeared into the rainy night. 2002. George's birthday sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows, illuminating balloons tied to the chairs and a small stack of neatly wrapped presents on the table. The smell of pancakes and bacon filled the air. George, 11 today, stepped down the stairs in his favorite T-shirt, eyes wide with excitement. "Happy birthday, George," his parents chorused, smiling warmly. His little sister peeked around the doorway, giggling, holding a handmade card. After breakfast, His parents handed him the presents. George tore through the colorful paper, laughing as he opened toys and books. Then his father reached behind the couch and pulled out a slightly larger, rectangular package. "Here's one more," his father said, smiling. George's eyes widened. He grabbed the box and tore the paper off, revealing a brand new PlayStation 2, black and sleek, still smelling faintly of factory polish. Beside it sat the controller and memory card, neatly packed. "Wow. Thanks," George said, hugging his parents. "This is amazing." He didn't notice anything strange. It was just a birthday gift, perfect and ordinary. Outside, the sun shone through the window, birds chirped, and the gentle morning breeze made the curtains dance. Everything seemed normal. Everything, except for what was waiting inside the PS2. The living room buzzed with excitement. George had set up the new PS2 on the TV, carefully plugging in the controllers and memory card. His parents and little sister gathered around the couch, curious and eager to join. "Who wants to go first?" George asked, grinning. "I do," his sister piped up, snatching controller. They spent the next hour passing the controllers around, laughing at clumsy jumps, missed shots, and silly character voices. George's father joined in for a racing game, steering his car off the track more than once, making everyone erupt in laughter. His mother, surprisingly competitive, mastered a puzzle game with quiet intensity, snatching victories at the last second. The PS2 whirred quietly, the disc spinning as pixels flew across the TV screen. The room was filled with laughter, cheers, and playful teasing. George's little sister shrieked when her character lost yet again, while George proudly boasted every small victory. Outside, sunlight poured through the windows, making the balloons shimmer. The world felt safe, ordinary, and perfect. The PS2 sat at the center of it all, seemingly just a source of fun, unaware that, somewhere deep inside its circuits, it held a dormant secret. A secret that would lie untouched for years, waiting for the right game, the right player, the right moment. The day passed in a blur of laughter, games, and cake. George and his family sang happy birthday, his little sister's voice squeaking on the high notes. Candles were blown out, wishes made, and presents stacked neatly beside him. By evening, the sun had dipped low, casting warm orange light through the windows. George, exhausted but happy, climbed the stairs to his bedroom, still clutching a small toy from the morning. "Good night, champ," his father called from the doorway. "Good night," George replied, smiling. He tucked himself under the covers, the PS2 still glowing faintly in the living room, untouched now until another day. Outside, the night was calm, ordinary, peaceful, and inside the PS2, its dormant secret remained undisturbed, waiting silently for future. Years passed. George grew taller, his voice deepened, and his interests slowly shifted. The PS2 remained a part of his home, but it no longer commanded the same excitement it once had. He spent countless hours playing the games he loved, racing, adventure, and sports titles, but never touched the one disc he didn't even know existed, the one that would one day hold the world's fate. Life moved on. School, friends, hobbies, even video games evolved. One day, he bought a new console, the sleek black Xbox 360. Its smooth menus, online multiplayer, and shiny new games captured his attention. The PS2 was carefully unplugged, placed back in its box, and eventually tucked into the corner of a cupboard. Dust settled on it over the years. Forgotten by George, ignored by time, it sat silently, a relic of another era. Somewhere deep inside its circuits, the dormant system waited. Waiting for the right moment, the right player, the right game. The countdown had not begun, but the potential for devastation lingered quietly, like a sleeping predator. Years would pass. 2023. George shuffled into GameStop store, a box tucked under his arm. The PS2 had sat in his cupboard for years, gathering dust. It was heavy, scratched in a few places, controllers frayed, a relic of his childhood. "I'm trading this in," he said to the clerk, sliding the box across the counter. "Just don't know why I kept it all these years." The clerk shrugged and scanned the console. $20 store credit. Not bad for a 20-year-old system. George took the credit card style receipt, glanced around the store at the new consoles and shiny game cases, and smiled faintly. Perfect. Maybe I'll grab an Xbox game or something. He left the store, PS2 gone, forgotten once more, unaware that somewhere in the back of GameStop, the console would sit, waiting for someone else to take it home. Someone who would actually play the disc it contained, the disc that had lain dormant for decades, holding a secret no one could imagine. The year was 2023. The world had moved on. The PS2, however, waited patiently. 2025, John Gatto, 35, woke in the middle of the day, drenched in sweat from the thick summer humidity. The ceiling fan did little to stir the heavy air. He lived with his parents, long-term unemployed, his life a slow loop of idle days. As he shuffled past the kitchen, he let out a grunting sound, a half-greeting, half-effort, to his mother. She gave a small smile and placed a plate of toast on the table, butter melting into the warm bread. "Eat something, John," she said gently. He waved a hand, mumbling, "I will," later, though he didn't seem inclined to stop. His father was at work. After a moment, he grabbed his bike from the garage and pedaled off, not heading to GameStop as usual. Instead, he aimed for the nearby park, seeking shade and a brief escape from the stifling house. The asphalt shimmered under the summer sun as he parked under a tall oak tree. He spotted a bubbler near the playground and took a long sip, letting the cool water trickle down his throat. He noticed a girl sitting alone on a bench, reading, and tried to summon the courage to say something. As he approached, heart thudding in his chest, she looked up, her eyes widened in alarm. Without a word, she scrambled to her feet and ran, fear etched across her face. John froze, a flush rising to his face, not from the sun this time, but from embarrassment. He hadn't meant to scare her. He hadn't even spoken. He leaned against the oak tree, taking another sip from the bubbler, feeling small and awkward in the heat. The distant laughter of children playing and the hum of cicadas surrounded him. Eventually, he climbed back onto his bike. GameStop wasn't on his mind yet. Not today. Today was just a small, humiliating taste of trying and failing, of wanting to connect but stumbling instead. The park emptied slowly in the afternoon sun, leaving John alone with his thoughts, his sweaty shirt clinging to his back, and the quiet tension of the day stretching ahead. John pushed off from the park, riding slowly through the quiet streets, still sticky from the summer heat. The awkward encounter with the girl lingered in his mind, but he tried to shake it off. As he turned a corner, he noticed GameStop ahead, the storefront plastered with bright signs. Closing down sale. Everything must go. He parked his bike against the curb and stepped inside. The smell of electronics hit him immediately, a mix of plastic, dust, and nostalgia. The store was quieter than he remembered. Half the shelves empty, displays tilted and dusty. As he wandered down an aisle, he greeted the clerk. "Wow. I've been coming to this store since I was a little kid," John said with a faint smile, letting the memory wash over him. The clerk nodded, a polite smile on his face. "Yeah, it's been here a long time. Sad to see it closing down." John continued walking through the aisles, scanning the racks of discounted games and old consoles. He didn't have any plan to buy something today. He was just looking, remembering. But somewhere in the back of the store, tucked among the aged consoles, a black PlayStation 2 waited silently, completely ordinary, and yet anything but. John wandered slowly through the closing down store, his eyes scanning the discounted racks of old consoles and games. He wasn't planning to buy anything, just indulging in a little nostalgia. Then, near the back corner, something caught his eye, a fat black PlayStation 2, sitting slightly apart from the other consoles, priced at $45. He paused, brushing a thin layer of dust off the top. The familiar design, bulky, unassuming, yet instantly recognizable, pulled at memories of his childhood. Afternoons spent playing games, friends over, the excitement of a new release. "Still got these," he muttered quietly to himself. Wow! The price tag was low enough to tempt him. He lifted it, testing the weight, feeling the solid heft of the console in his hands. For a moment, it felt like he was holding a piece of his own past, a connection to simpler days. John's fingers lingered over the PS2. He didn't know it yet, but inside that ordinary console lay a dormant system, a hidden secret waiting decades to be awakened. John held the fat PS2 in his hands, eyes lingering on the $45 price tag. He frowned. Money was tight, really tight. He couldn't afford it. "Hey, when you guys close?" he asked the clerk. 5 o'clock. The clerk replied, glancing at the wall clock. 20 past 4 now. John's pulse quickened. 25 minutes. Maybe enough. He nodded, then without another word, bolted out of the store. He jumped onto his bike, legs pumping harder than they had in years, sweat stinging his eyes. The wind whipped against his face as he raced down the street, heart hammering, adrenaline surging. He had to get home, fast. He needed to ask his mom for money before the store closed. Every second counted. The PS2, his link to nostalgia and something more. It had to be his. The summer air blurred past him, pedaling harder than he ever had. John Gatto raced against the clock, unaware that the console he sought held a dormant secret that could one day trigger a countdown unlike anything the world had ever seen. John slammed to the front door, terrifying his mother, who had been watching TV. "Would you like a cup of lemonade?" she asked, startled, holding the pitcher halfway to her lips. "No, I hate that stuff." John yelled, voice sharp and frantic. I need $45. His mother froze, eyes wide, then hurried to her wallet. She found $50 and held it out, trembling slightly. Before she could react further, John snatched it from her hand. "I'll pay you back," he shouted over his shoulder, already sprinting toward the door. The door slammed behind him, leaving the living room silent except for the faint hum of the TV. His mother stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. John kicked off on the curb, legs pumping harder than ever. The $50 clutched tightly in his hand. Sweat stung his eyes, the summer air thick and heavy. But he didn't care. The streets blurred past him as he pedaled faster and faster. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every car that passed a small obstacle in his desperate race against time. He glanced at his watch. 4:35. 25 minutes until closing. He could make it. He had to make it. His lungs burned, heart hammering in his chest. But the image of the fat PS2 sitting alone in the back of GameStop pushed him onward. He could almost feel the console in his hands, smell the faint polish on the plastic, hear the faint hum of the disk drive waiting to spin. No one else knew it. No one else cared. Only he had the chance to claim it, and maybe, unknowingly, awaken something that had been waiting decades for the right player. The store loomed ahead. John pushed harder, pedaling faster than he ever had, racing against the clock, against the closing doors, against the quiet tension of the day stretching into something much bigger than he could imagine. John skidded to a stop outside the store, glancing at his watch. 4:55 p.m. Just 5 minutes until closing. He pushed open the door, the familiar chime ringing through the nearly empty store. The clerk looked up, eyebrows raised. "Back so soon?" the clerk asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. John didn't answer. He moved quickly, eyes scanning the aisles, looking for the PS2 he had spotted earlier. There was, tucked in a dusty corner, the fat black console, still $45. He grabbed it without hesitation, clutching it to his chest like a prize. The weight felt right in his hands, a tangible connection to his childhood, to memories he hadn't realized he missed. The clerk rang it up, the scanner beeped. $45 exactly, he said. John handed over the cash, heart still racing, and with the console in his arms. He bolted toward the door. Outside, the sun was low, shadows stretching across the asphalt. He had the PS2. He had won the race against time. But he had no idea that inside this ordinary console, a decades-old secret waited, ready to awaken at the right moment. John finally arrived home, PS2 in hand, legs sore from the frantic ride. He stepped inside, letting the door click shut behind him, and for a moment he just breathed, letting the tension of the day fade. He carried the console to his room and set it down on the desk. For now, it sat there forgotten, a relic of the past he had been chasing more out of nostalgia than purpose. John flopped onto his bed and opened his laptop. YouTube videos about the 90s played in one tab, commercials, TV shows, and music videos, while he switched intermittently to Reddit, where he was a moderator in a few small communities. The glow of the screen and the familiar hum of his computer kept him company. He thought about the 90s, how things felt simpler, better somehow, a time when consoles like the PS2 were new, exciting, and full of possibility. But the PS2 sat on his desk, untouched, quietly waiting. Hours passed as he alternated between YouTube and Reddit. "John, dinner's ready," his mother shouted from the kitchen. The smell of hot dogs with tomato sauce, but no bun, filled the air. John didn't respond. He simply got up from his bed, grabbed a plate, and quietly carried it back to his room. He set the plate on his desk beside the PS2, not saying a word, barely acknowledging the presence of his parents. The warm summer air clung to the room, the fan spinning lazily above, doing little to alleviate the stickiness. John sat down, fork in hand, eyes on a laptop screen as YouTube videos and Reddit tabs flickered in front of him. The PS2 sat silently beside the plate, forgotten for now, but ready, waiting, its dormant secret still untouched. 10 p.m. John's plate of hot dogs, smeared with tomato sauce, had been abandoned on the desk, now crawling with ants. He barely noticed, eyes glued to his laptop screen. He was scrolling through YouTube, watching videos about the worst PS2 games you've never heard of. Half amused, half bored. Then he froze. There it was, Ocean Wars 2, the game he had loved as a kid, the game that had given him countless hours of joy. And here it was on a list of terrible games you never should have played. Rage bubbled up uncontrollably. John slammed his fist on the desk, flipping the plate of sauce and hot dogs onto the floor. Ants scattered. Tomato sauce pooled on his carpet. He barely noticed. His fingers pounded on the keyboard, typing a scathing response to the video. YouTube deleted it automatically, too offensive. He paused, took a deep breath, and found a middle ground. A comment sharp enough to convey his outrage, but tame enough to stick. He hit post. It went through. John leaned back, chest heaving, still staring at the screen. The PS2 sat beside him, silent, unassuming, a relic of the past, quietly waiting. Ocean Wars 2 was just a game again. For now, 2 a.m., the glow of the laptop finally dimmed as John leaned back in his chair. Exhaustion tugged at him after hours of scrolling, commenting, and reliving memories. He stood, stretching, and moved toward his bed. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan, sticky summer air clinging to his skin. John flicked off the light and crawled under the covers, sinking into the quiet darkness. The PS2 sat untouched on his desk, still a relic of his childhood. Within moments, he drifted into sleep. John woke to knocking on his bedroom door. He squinted at his phone. 9 a.m. His father's voice called through the door. "John, time to get up. I've lined up a laboring position for you at my construction company. Starting Monday, you're coming with me." John groaned, stretching and rubbing his eyes. The summer heat already made the room sticky, the fan barely stirring the thick air. He swung his legs off the bed, letting the words sink in. Monday wasn't today, but soon enough, he'd have no choice but to step into a world far different from his long, idle days. John shot up from his bed, voice raw with irritation. "I don't want to work. It's Friday, not Monday." His father's tone was firm, unwavering. "John, I'm not asking. Starting Monday, you have a laboring position at the construction company. Consider these next 2 days a chance to enjoy yourself, but be ready." John groaned, flopping back onto bed. Relief and irritation mingled. He didn't have to start today, but the looming workweek already weighed on him like a shadow. John stormed into the kitchen, tears welling in his eyes, his voice trembling with frustration. "I don't want to work. I can't do it." His mother looked up from the dishes, her expression softening. She stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I told your father. I told him you don't like working," she said gently, her voice full of sympathy. "But he wasn't hearing it, John. He thinks this is what you need." John sank into a chair, shoulders slumping. The anger and fear mingled with exhaustion. leaving him feeling small and unheard despite his mother's comfort. John sat slumped in the chair, still tense and frustrated. His father leaned against the counter, laughing softly as he cracked open a cold beer. "It's not so bad, John," he said, taking a sip and letting the foam linger on his lips for a moment. "You'll manage. Monday's just a start, nothing to get worked up about." John glared, feeling the weight of his father's nonchalance pressing down on him. The beer, the laughter, the casual tone, it all made his anger feel small, almost pointless. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the frustration, knowing deep down that resistance would only last a few more days. John bolted from the kitchen, racing to his room. He slammed the door behind him, heart still pounding, and flopped onto his bed. He opened his laptop and quickly typed out a Reddit post, venting about his frustration, his dread of the upcoming work week, and his sense of helplessness. Within minutes, responses trickled in. Many were sympathetic, sharing stories of their own struggles with jobs, parents, or responsibilities. John read them, scrolling through each supportive comment, letting the temporary warmth wash over him. For a brief moment, he felt relieved, understood, less alone in the world. But deep down, he knew the truth. Sympathy online couldn't change the reality awaiting him. Monday would come, and with it, the laboring job at the construction company. The comfort faded, leaving John staring at the screen, caught between fleeting solace and the unavoidable future. For once, John uncharacteristically shut his laptop off. The usual glow of YouTube and Reddit no longer held any appeal. He sat in his chair, staring blankly, filled with a heavy, gnawing despair. The weight of the upcoming work week, the relentless pressure from his father, and his own frustrations pressed down on him. Slowly, he rose and walked over to the PS2 he had bought earlier, picking it up almost absent-mindedly. The familiar heft of the console in his hands brought a faint, fleeting sense of nostalgia, a reminder of simpler days. For a moment, he considered just turning on, letting himself be drawn into a world of games, memories, and distractions, anything to escape the looming reality of Monday. John trudged over to the cupboard at the side of his room. Dust motes danced in the streaks of sunlight as he pulled out his old Sony Trinitron CRT TV. The bulky screen and curved glass a sharp contrast to the sleek flat panels of modern technology. He set it carefully on his desk, wincing slightly at the weight. The familiar orange glow of the power indicator and the hum of the cathode ray tube brought a small, almost comforting nostalgia. The TV sat there waiting as John prepared to reconnect with an older world, one filled with games, memories, and distractions far removed from the looming reality of his upcoming job. John connected the PS2 to the Trinitron CRT TV. The familiar hum of the console filling the quiet room. He slid Gran Turismo 3 into the disc tray, the screen flickering to life with the game's iconic menu. Without much thought, he selected a track and began to drive. Hours seemed to melt away as he mindlessly circled the same course, tires screeching virtually, fingers tapping the controller out of habit rather than strategy. The game sounds, engines roaring, tires skidding, distant crowds, filled the room. John's mind was elsewhere. He wasn't racing to win or aiming for records. He was just driving in circles, letting the familiar controls and endless laps distract him from reality, from Monday, from all the pressure waiting outside his room. John walked over to his cupboard, fingers brushing along the dusty spines of his old PS2 games. About 100 titles were crammed into the shelves, a chaotic archive of his childhood. He flipped through them absent-mindedly, lifting a few out, examining their covers, letting memories flicker through his mind. Eventually, his hand paused on a familiar case. He pulled out the game, Ocean Wars 2. Turning it over, he looked at the back, reading the tiny text, the ratings, the faint scratches from years of storage. He didn't realize the significance of what he held. The exact PS2, the exact game, a combination that had been lying dormant for decades. The room was quiet, sunlight filtering lazily through the curtains. In the universe's own timing, the pieces were falling into place. The stars were aligning, though John remained blissfully unaware. He sighed, a mixture of nostalgia and boredom, and placed the disc gently on top of the PS2. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed dangerous. And yet, The moment had come. John carefully placed the Ocean Wars 2 disc inside the PS2. The console whirred to life, the familiar hum of the fan filling the quiet room. Suddenly, the screen flashed bright green, an odd, almost electric glow that made him blink. He frowned, leaning closer, but the flash faded as quickly as it appeared. Then, the familiar nostalgic menu appeared, complete with the retro graphics and music that had once defined his childhood afternoons. The soft chiptune melody filled the room, oddly comforting and stirring forgotten memories. John leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. It looked like the old game, sounded like the old game, just as he remembered, but something subtle, imperceptible, had already begun in the background, unnoticed. John selected the training level, as he had done countless times in his childhood. The familiar opening sequence rolled across the screen. He couldn't help but notice how dated the graphics had become. The textures blocky, the explosions pixelated, the water flat and unconvincing. He chuckled quietly to himself, remembering how impressive it had once seemed. The music played, a nostalgic loop, and he moved his ship through the exercises, almost mindlessly following the on-screen instructions. It was comfortable, familiar, a safe routine. The game seemed harmless, just a relic of the past. But somewhere deep within the code, long dormant and waiting, the mechanism for what could happen next had begun its silent preparation. After finishing the training level, John navigated the menu and clicked New Game. The screen flickered for a moment, then a familiar yet slightly ominous chime played, the same nostalgic sound he remembered from childhood, but somehow sharper, more insistent. The game began. The retro graphics appeared, the music looping softly, comforting and familiar. Yet beneath it, there was an undercurrent John couldn't sense, a subtle tension, a silent warning buried in the code, waiting for the player's first move. John leaned forward, absorbed in the nostalgia, unaware that this simple click had set a dormant mechanism into motion, starting a chain of events that had been lying in wait for decades. John had been playing for about 30 minutes, navigating the missions and battles with the same concentration he remembered from his youth. Yet, it was far more difficult than he recalled. The controls felt stiffer, the enemies sharper, the timing unforgiving. Suddenly, during a steep canyon level, his ship tumbled down a sheer gorge. The familiar jolt of panic washed over him. For a brief moment, a childhood memory surfaced. He remembered this exact fall, the sense of defeat, the frustration he had felt all those years ago. Not again, he muttered, gripping the controller tightly, a mix of nostalgia and exasperation twisting in his chest. John's eyes widened in confusion as the game suddenly quit, the familiar gameplay vanishing in an instant. The screen switched to a strange, unfamiliar menu, glowing with a sharp green hue that made him blink. From the console came a faint buzzing, almost like static at first. Then, startlingly, a phone-like ringing echoed from the PS2 itself, a sound completely impossible for any ordinary game. "Hello? Hello?" A voice called out, distorted and electronic, reverberating through the speakers. John froze, gripping the controller tightly. His heart raced, and a chill ran down his spine. This was not part of the game, and yet it was happening in real time, in his room, through the console he had just turned on. The nostalgia, the comfort of the past, vanished instantly. Something far older, far stranger, had awakened. John's hands trembled slightly as he pressed a button on the controller, uncertain if it would even work. Who is this?" he asked, voice wavering. For a long moment, there was only silence, the faint buzzing still lingering in the background. Then the voice returned, calm, clipped, and strange. "Okay." And just like that, it seemingly stopped, the phone-like sound fading as if the call had hung up. John blinked, confused, heart racing. He lowered the controller slowly, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Nothing in his childhood memory, or any game manual, could explain this. John blinked, still processing the strange phone call, when the screen suddenly flickered. The familiar green glow vanished, replaced by a black screen. Bright red numbers appeared in the center, counting down. 2 hours, he frowned, tilting his head. Huh. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, squinting at the screen. The hum from the console had deepened, the faint buzzing from before now more insistent. He tapped the buttons and even tried unplugging the console briefly. Nothing changed. John leaned back in his chair, scratching his head, utterly baffled. This wasn't how a PS2 game was supposed to behave. It didn't make sense, and yet the countdown ticked steadily downward. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just a normal game, but he had no idea what it actually was. Confused but curious, John grabbed his phone and snapped a photo of the countdown on the PS2 screen. He posted it to Reddit, trying to get some perspective from his online community. But something was immediately wrong. Every post containing the image was automatically deleted within seconds. He tried again, refreshing, posting in multiple subreddits, all vanished. Then the notification hit. Your account has been permanently banned. John stared at his phone, blinking in disbelief. Nothing he did made sense. The website had erased his posts, removed him entirely, as if the image, the countdown, wasn't supposed to exist. A mix of confusion and unease filled him. This was no ordinary glitch. Something about the console, the disc, the countdown, was breaking the rules of reality itself. John slumped on his bed, laptop open but idle, staring at the blank screen. His thoughts churned, the looming workweek, his permanently banned Reddit account, and now the PS2. The console sat on his desk, no longer responsive. Its only function seemed to be the bright red countdown, ticking away inexorably on the screen. He ran a hand over his face, sighing. Despair settled in like a heavy blanket. Nothing worked the way it was supposed to. Every familiar escape, forums, games, distractions, had been stripped away. All that remained was a relentless, impossible timer, a silent reminder that something beyond his understanding was unfolding. John sank further into the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling smaller and more powerless than ever. Frustration finally drove John off the bed. He grabbed the PS2 and yanked the power plug from the wall. For a moment, he expected silence, darkness, relief. Instead, the countdown continued on the screen, red numbers ticking down with the same steady rhythm. The faint buzzing persisted, as if the console had its own power source hidden somewhere. "What the hell?" John whispered, leaning closer. His hand shook slightly as he tried pressing buttons, shaking the console, even blowing on the disk slot. Nothing worked. The timer kept counting down relentlessly. John's frustration mounting. He pulled the AV cables from the Sony Trinitron TV. The screen went completely black, and for a moment he felt a flicker of relief. Curious, he plugged the cables back in, expecting the normal PS2 startup. Instead, the screen immediately displayed the countdown, ticking down relentlessly as if nothing had been disconnected. He stepped back, eyes wide, whispering to himself, "There's a battery in here." The realization struck him. The console was operating independently of external power, its countdown unstoppable by any conventional means. John's confusion deepened. The impossible persistence of the timer, making it clear this was far beyond any ordinary game. Determined to understand what was happening, John grabbed his laptop and searched for a YouTube tutorial on opening a PS2. He watched carefully, noting each step, and then retrieved his screwdrivers. Piece by piece, he dismantled the console. The casing came off, screws laid neatly on his desk. When he finally exposed the motherboard, John froze. His eyes scanned the circuits, wires, and chips, and something was off. It wasn't like the tutorial. The layout was unusual, with components arranged differently than in a normal PS2. There were extra chips and wires, circuits running in unexpected directions, and tiny modules he didn't recognize. He leaned closer, confusion growing. What is this?" he whispered. The console was clearly modified, strange in design but entirely human-made, a puzzle that defied his expectations. John's eyes lingered on the motherboard, scanning every unusual detail. A large battery sat prominently on one side, clearly capable of powering the console independently. His eyebrows rose. No wonder the countdown continued even when unplugged. Even more striking, Many of the components looked like they were made from gold, their faint metallic shine catching the light. It was as if the console had been built to last for decades, far beyond the lifespan of any normal PS2. John leaned closer, running a finger along the edge of the battery. "That's built to survive anything," he murmured. The craftsmanship was meticulous, the materials over-engineered, and the purpose uncomfortably deliberate. Every detail suggested this was no ordinary game console. It was designed to endure, to persist, to keep the console alive no matter what. John reached for his phone and snapped a photo of the exposed motherboard, capturing the large battery, the gold-tinted components, and the strange layout. He studied the image for a moment, trying to make sense of what he'd seen, before carefully putting the console back together. Screws were tightened, the casing snapped into place, and the PS2 looked normal again, deceptively ordinary from the outside. John plugged the PS2 back into the TV. The screen flickered to life, and immediately the familiar countdown appeared, unbroken. He gently pulled the Ocean Wars 2 disc out and placed it back in its case, careful not to jostle anything. The numbers glared back at him. 1 hour and 10 minutes. John's eyes widened. The clock was ticking, and despite everything he had done, unplugging cables, dismantling the console, examining the motherboard, the countdown had not stopped. He sat back, unsure whether to feel relief that the game was safely set aside or frustration that the timer continued, unyielding and unstoppable. Still curious, John returned to his laptop. He created a new Reddit account, hoping this one wouldn't be banned immediately. He posted the photo of the PS2 motherboard, showing the large battery and gold-tinted components. For a few fleeting minutes, the post stayed visible. Comments started rolling in. "Wow, that looks so cool. Is this modded or custom built? Are you selling it?" John scrolled, feeling a small sense of validation. People were noticing the craftsmanship, appreciating the console's unusual design. But the moment was brief. Within 5 minutes, the post vanished, deleted automatically. The comments disappeared along with it. John leaned back, scratching his head, realizing that whatever rules governed his console extended even to the outside world. Even showing the inside of the motherboard couldn't exist online for long. Moments after his Reddit post disappeared, John noticed his internet connection had dropped. He frowned, clicking icons, refreshing pages, even rebooting the router. Nothing. No Wi-Fi, no signal, nothing. "How odd," he muttered, tilting his head. The timing was uncanny. The post vanished, and now the entire connection was gone. John leaned back in his chair, staring at the blank browser and the relentless countdown on the PS2, a creeping unease settling in. It was as if the console was dictating the rules, silently asserting its presence over everything around him. John stomped out of his room, frustration written across his face. "The internet's out," he complained, voice edged with irritation. His mother looked up from her knitting, eyebrows raised. "Really? Did you check the modem?" "Of course I checked. It's all gone, completely dead," John said, throwing his hands in the air. "I was in the middle of something." She gave a small, sympathetic sigh. "Well, I guess some things just stop working sometimes. You'll have to wait a bit, I suppose." John muttered under his breath, half exasperated, half baffled. The timing was uncanny, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the PS2 sitting on his desk was somehow connected. Without internet, John had no choice but to do something he hadn't done in years. He trudged over to the living room, grabbed the remote, and turned on the television, scanning through the free-to-air channels. Static, commercials, reruns, nothing held his attention. He flipped from one channel to the next, bored out his brain, the summer sun glaring through the windows. Every familiar distraction he relied on was gone. No Reddit, no YouTube, no streaming, just the old TV, the same shows he watched as a kid, and the ever-present tick of the PS2 countdown echoing in his mind. John stomped back into the living room, frustration boiling over. "Oh yeah? My PS2 is already broke," he exclaimed, pointing toward his room. "You know, the one I got today." His mother looked up, eyes calm but firm. "I warned you about buying old junk, John." "I don't care," he snapped, throwing his hands in the air. "It's just... It's not working, And now the internet's out too. Everything's broken. She gave a small, sympathetic sigh, setting aside her knitting. Well, it sounds like you're having a rough day. Maybe step away from it for a bit. John muttered something under his breath, half angry, half bewildered, and stormed back toward his room, the countdown on the PS2 still ticking silently, unseen. John stood in the living room, still fuming, when the television his mother had been watching suddenly flickered. The usual programming vanished, replaced by images of green fields and countryside, wide open meadows, trees swaying gently and sunlight glinting off distant streams. He reached for the remote. "Change the channel," he demanded. But every button, every channel, showed the exact same scene. Static commercials, news, all gone. Just endless rolling fields, serene and impossibly perfect. His mother's eyes widened. What is happening?" she whispered. John felt a strange mix of confusion and unease. John walked back to his room, glancing at the PS2 as he went. The screen displayed the countdown, 30 minutes. He paused for a moment, eyebrows raised. "Waste of money," he muttered quietly to himself. But beyond that, he didn't care much. Work, internet outages, strange TV images, none of it fully registered. To John, the countdown was curious, mildly inconvenient, but not something worth panicking over. He shrugged, sat down, and went about his routine, leaving the ticking timer on the screen continue silently, steadily, counting down towards something he couldn't yet comprehend. With nothing else to do, John lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, letting his thoughts wander. Suddenly, a roar filled the sky outside, shaking the windows. He sat up, heart racing, and ran to the window. Above, dozens of military planes cut through the sky, their engines thunderous, moving in precise formation. His father stepped outside, shading his eyes, and looked up. "It's just an exercise," he said calmly, as though the massive display of firepower were completely normal. John squinted, still confused. The noise, the sheer scale, it was breathtaking and intimidating. Yet his father's calm words tried to anchor him. For a moment, John allowed himself to believe it was routine, unaware of how this moment aligned with the strange countdown still ticking in his room. 5 minutes later, the roar of engines faded, leaving the sky perfectly clear once more. The planes were gone, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. John turned to his father, still blinking at the empty sky. "Well, that was something," he muttered. His father chuckled softly. "Exercises like that come and go. Nothing to worry about." Together, they walked back inside the house. The normal sounds of summer returned. Birds, distant traffic, the quiet hum of appliances. Yet in John's room, the PS2's countdown continued silently, its presence almost imperceptible against the calm of the afternoon. Bored out of his mind without his usual internet distractions, John walked back into his room, dragging his feet. The PS2 sat quietly on his desk, the screen glowing red with the countdown, 2 minutes. He paused, raising an eyebrow. "Huh. Only 2 minutes left," he muttered, curiosity more than fear in his tone. To him, it was strange and mildly interesting, a minor distraction from his boredom. He didn't understand the weight of what was happening, nor the relentless mechanism quietly ticking away on the console. John flopped onto his bed, watching the numbers tick down, still mostly indifferent. As the final moment approached, John leaned back in his chair, curiosity winning over concern. "Might as well watch it go down to 0, he muttered. He stared at the CRT television, eyes fixed on the glowing red numbers as they ticked steadily. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second. Midnight then, abruptly, the screen exploded with color, and a giant digital version of Michael Jackson's face appeared, smiling strangely. "Would you like Pepsi or Coke?" the face asked, its voice clear and oddly cheerful. John jumped back, startled by the randomness of it all. What the hell?" he whispered, blinking at the screen. The countdown was over, but whatever had been waiting for him hadn't gone anywhere. Instead, the PS2 had revealed something utterly bizarre and completely unexpected, leaving John more confused than ever. The surreal image of Michael Jackson vanished as the screen went completely blank. The console powered down on its own, silence filling the room. John exhaled slowly, still bewildered, when a very loud, thunder-like boom shook the house from outside. Windows rattled, and the air seemed to vibrate with the sound. His heart jumped. He rushed to the window, scanning the sky, expecting to see something, anything, that could explain the deafening noise. But the sky was perfectly clear, eerily calm, as if nothing had happened. Startled by the thunderous boom, John bolted from his room, heart still pounding. "What was that noise?" he demanded, looking between his parents. His mother shook her head, brows furrowed. "I have no idea. I didn't hear anything like that before." His father scratched the back of his neck, glancing toward the sky. "Maybe a military plane crash or some exercise gone wrong," he speculated. John's eyes narrowed. Something about the explanation felt too convenient, too vague. He wanted answers, but for now, all he had was uncertainty. Just as John tried to process his father's vague explanation, another boom reverberated through the air. Then another, and another. Some were soft rumbles, barely noticeable over the summer breeze. Others were loud enough to shake the house, rattling windows and making the floor vibrate under his feet. John's heart raced. He grabbed the doorway, looking out at the quiet streets, trying to pinpoint the source. Nothing was visible. Nothing seemed wrong. Yet the sequence of noises felt deliberate, like a rhythm he couldn't understand. Each boom left a lingering vibration in the air, echoing in his mind. He glanced back toward his room, toward the PS2. The console sat silently, innocuous, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that somehow it was connected to the strange, unfolding events outside. By the time the clock struck 7 p.m., the booms had seemingly stopped, leaving an uneasy calm over the neighborhood. John sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. His phone had no signal for hours, leaving him completely cut off from news, help, or any way to track where the noises were coming from. He stared out the window at the darkening sky, the earlier chaos feeling both distant and immediate, as if it could resume at any moment. A heavy sigh escaped him. For the first time in days, he was entirely alone with his thoughts, trapped between boredom, curiosity, and the lingering uncertainty of the strange events unfolding outside. John heard his mother call from the kitchen, "Dinner, John." He trudged out, expecting the usual chatter, but his parents were strangely quiet, their faces reflecting the lingering tension from the earlier booms. On the table sat pizza, simple and unremarkable, yet felt oddly comforting in the strange calm. John grabbed a slice and carried it back to his room, setting it down beside him. He ate in silence, the quiet of the house broken only by the distant hum of the evening. Even in the mundane routine of dinner, the aftershocks of the day's events seemed to linger, pressing on everyone's minds. With nothing to do and no internet, John decided to turn in early, hoping a few hours of sleep might make the strange day feel more manageable. He drifted off, the quiet evening lulling him toward rest. But maybe 3 hours later, a deafening boom shook him awake. This time, it wasn't just sound. A blinding flash of light illuminated his room for a heartbeat, casting jagged shadows across the walls. The windows rattled violently, and shards of glass trembled in their frames. Electricity flickered, and then cut out entirely, leaving the house in pitch darkness. John sat up, heart hammering, ears still ringing from the explosion. The night felt instantly different, heavier, charged, as if something monumental and uncontrollable had just erupted nearby. John and his parents rushed outside, hearts pounding, drawn by the deafening boom and the blinding flash. Instead of seeing the familiar neighborhood, they were met with an unnatural blackness. The sky was dark, almost as if the night had deepened unnaturally, swallowing everything in sight. Dogs barked furiously all around, their frantic cries echoing in the still air. The sounds were unsettling, panicked, as if the animals sensed something invisible but terrifying. John grabbed his mother's arm. "What's happening?" he whispered, voice shaking. His father shook his head, squinting into the darkness. "I don't know. This isn't normal. Not at all." The street, the trees, the houses, all were shrouded in impenetrable darkness, and the family could only stand there, straining to hear or see what had caused the chaos.